episode, we are joined by the one and only Jon Holling actually, it's not Ask an Expert, it's Hanging with Jon. So I apologize for misnaming this one. But we have Jon here this week to do a member video review, which are always so much fun because I love seeing all the horses and all the riders and hearing Jon's feedback. And I actually do know that after our last, the small aside note, like, I think you should wear black gloves instead of white gloves to one of our members. And she went and got like a way dressage show. So all I'm saying is that these are super effective for people. And Jon is a wizard. That's the moral of the story.
That's all you're saying.
That's all I'm saying. Jon, how are you doing today?
I'm great. We had the event this weekend at the horse park, and today has been pretty relaxing, and I'm ready to go. I'm excited to see some horse videos.
That's wonderful. Well, yeah, and we're doing this on a Monday, so we're mixing it up a bit, but we're excited to dive in. So let's do that. We'll dive right in, and we're going to get started with a video from Sarah Jane. And let me get her video up before I start telling you about Sarah Jane and what questions she has. Here we go. I think, bear with me while I share. Okay, so you can see Sarah Jane, correct?
Yep, I can.
Perfect. So Sarah Jane said, here is Pip and her show jumping round at the latest 2-day event. She's keen to get your feedback on how they're going as a team and tips for improvement. She would also like to step up to 95 centimeters in eventing, which is modified in the US scale, but they need some more time to hone their dressage skills and nail distances more consistently. What signs should I be looking out for to start entering some higher pure show jumping phases? Pip is a meter-30 horse with his previous owner, and she's training some fences at 1 meter, but still working on her distances and riding the canter. Any and all tips are very welcome. She lives for feedback and homework ideas.
All right. So first thing I would say, focusing on the positive stuff, it is a really wonderfully straight horse. That first jump came directly at the camera, and it was an awesome line to the jump. I love that. And I like the balance and the connection. The horse looks nice and uphill. You could say that you would love to have a little more bend. But as I say that, I don't want you to lose the straightness for the bend. When I talk about bend, I'm talking about suppleness and softness in the bridle. And that said, I also don't want him or her, was it a mare or a gelding? I can't remember now. It doesn't matter. I don't want the horse to be overly deep. I'd rather he were up and out in the frame like he is here. But that said, I think if you can just establish that nice, soft, elastic connection, keep working on the quality of the shape of the canter between the jumps, that's only going to help. I like your position. You don't lean forward too much. As the fences get bigger, you're going to want to release more, to follow more with your horse's neck, to encourage him to jump better and use his top line more. And I think you could utilize your automatic release a little bit better to do that. At the height you're at right now, I think your release is perfectly adequate. But when these fences get bigger, you're naturally going to want to release more. And typically what happens then for most people is they end up getting into that big crest release. So just watch that doesn't happen. I don't see that yet. I see you kind of in like a little modified 3/4 release, but that tends when the fences get bigger and you get more excited, then you get quick and you get that big crest release. So be thinking about your automatic release, which means you go down your horse's shoulder blade, kind of following along where the breastplate would lie, and push your hands down towards the horse's mouth that way. That's going to help you, one, have your horse be happier in its mouth and willing to follow your hand because it knows where your hand is. So then they're happier to take that feel to follow your hand. I find sometimes when you give that crest release, not only does it affect your position, which we'll talk about in a second, but it also breaks the contact, right? You get a loop in the rein. So then when you go to take the contact back, it snaps. So then the horses are a little less willing, even though it seems like they should be willing with a loop rein. They're a little less willing sometimes to stretch into that bridle and take the bit because they don't trust where your hand's going to be in a second. The other benefit of that automatic release is that when you land, you already have that connection, which means you can ride to the next fence more efficiently. You can keep your horse softer. All of those things are going to help. So I would think a little bit about just making sure when you go forward or go up rather to the next height, which you look ready to do, by the way, that you keep that good solid position that you have, that you're not getting sort of into that trap that happens to a lot of people where you end up getting more forward with your upper body as the fences get bigger. Your position is really good right now and you want to keep that. And I think if you focus obviously on your leg and your heels down and all of that, that's always very good stuff to do. And you need to do that. But if you focus on targeting your hands down into that automatic release, that actually helps the rest of your position a lot more than I think people realize.
And Sarah Jane had mentioned she feels like she needs to work on seeing her distances. And do you have any homework recommend to any of your students who are feeling that way?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, I'd say from the video I just watched, you looked like you saw all your distances. A couple of the jumps were off in the distance of the ring and the camera wasn't zoomed in as much. So maybe there was something out there I missed. But that said, yes. So couple things. One really simple exercise is make sure you're looking at the jump. If you're not sure if you are, you think you are, but you're like, am I really? One thing that's really good is get your trainer or your friend who needs to have a little bit of money to put coins or paper money on the top rail of the fence. So like the front rail of the oxer or the back rail, if you like looking at the back rail, or the top rail of vertical. And you should be able, when you canter up to that, to be able to say to your friend, that is 50 cents or whatever. I think, are we from Australia in this video? Is that what I gathered? Yeah. So I don't know. Do they call them, what do they call Australian money?
Australian dollars. Yeah.
Australian dollars. It's not like kangaroos or something like that.
You can call it kangaroos.
You have 50 kangaroos on your jump, 50 cents, and be able to identify that and say, yep, okay, I know what's there. Because then you know you're really laser focused. Now, if you have incredibly bad vision and you can't see, then that's probably not going to be that helpful. But it's something that I have found really helps people to see their distances, is actually just be that focused on the jump. The other thing that's really helpful is you set a rail on the ground. I like to do it 6 strides out from my jump. So we do not count the landing stride off of that placing rail. So I'm just getting out my phone for my calculator here. So normally a 6 stride would be 84 feet. So I would say that you want that to be at longest from your pole on the ground, 78 feet. That'd be 6 feet off, 78 feet at the longest. And you may want to shorten it up even a little bit more to like 74, 75 feet, depending on your horse's length of stride. I don't want you chasing down there. But you set that pole. And by the way, before you set the pole on the ground and then just gallop down to the oxer and be like, John said 78 feet would work. Do it like with poles on the ground first, or at least do a small jump to start, please. Okay. Set that pole on the ground. And then, you know, when you step clean to that pole, which you have to look at like it's a jump, you know, all right, that is 6 strides to that jump. And that helps you start to get a gauge in your eye as to seeing your distance 6 strides away. People tend to get very good at seeing their distance 2 or 3 strides out, which is super, right? Like if you can do that, that is helpful. The problem is at 2 or 3 strides out, there's not much you can do to fix it if it's not right. So I can hear everybody out there right now sighing and being like, oh, I can't see my distance 6 strides out. Well, this is a way you can start to practice that. And it's like a lot of things, like even in the safety world, if you can see 6 strides out some of the time, well, that's better than none of the time, right? So don't be shy about trying to learn this stuff and going to an event and being like, okay, well, I can see it 5 or 6 strides out, maybe 25% of the time. Well, If that's 25% more than what you were able to do before you cantered over a pole on the ground, that's a big improvement. That's a huge improvement. So those are the two things I do. I'm motivated by money. So money on the pole works really well for me. But that said, I still use the pole on the ground 6 strides out for myself. If I have a horse that maybe has a different length of stride than some of the other horses, like I have a young horse named Irving. He's a big dude. He has a huge step. I rode him at a horse show this weekend and I realized like, I don't see my distance as well on him as the other horses because it's such a different canter than the other horses. So my plan, my next jump school is to work that exercise so I get a gauge as to what is Irving's stride. Like, honestly, I might have to set it for him at 86 feet. I don't know, just to start getting a feel for it. So it's a good thing to practice when you're learning. It's a good thing to practice when you're learning a new horse.
So there's this is maybe maybe not a good question, but you hear a lot of like getting yelled at by your coach or getting told by your coach like don't stare at the jump, because if you're staring at there's almost, when you're so beginner, you're supposed to like stare up into the clouds, like just like do not look at the jump, and then at some point, but nobody tells you what that point is, now all of a sudden you're supposed to be looking at the jump to get your distance. Like what's happening there?
So when I teach brand new, never jumped before beginner riders, I absolutely say to them, come through the turn, line your horse up straight, get in your 2-point, grab the mane, loop the rein, and let your horse jump up and down underneath you. In my opinion, once you get to the point where you're cantering courses, like proper courses, 2 foot, something like that, and you're actually cantering around, I think you should have enough body control at that point that you can move your eyes without moving your body. At a minimum, if you're talking about going training level, you should be able to look to your jumps when you're cantering to them. And the analogy that I always use is, because when I go to clinics, we talk a lot about this. I say to the clinic participants, when you got here, if the clinic organizer said to you that you need to park your horse trailer, back it up to the barn, and be within 3 inches of the wall, but when you do it, you have to look at the tree over the top of the indoor. How close and how well do you think you would back that trailer up? And the answer is not well, right? You would either be 6 feet away from it because you'd be scared to back into it, or you would back directly through the wall and into the horse's stall. So I think the reality is you need to be able to, by the time you're able to canter around courses, I really think you should at least be comfortable looking at what it is you're jumping so that you can start building that confidence to eventually develop your eye. I think by the time you're going training level, you should at least be aware of, I see it or I don't. And honestly, by the time you're going preliminary, you should be able to see a distance 3 strides out for sure, in my opinion. And again, when I say this stuff, I'm not saying this is like black and white. You must never miss. People make mistakes. I make mistakes. All the time. But that's what you're striving for.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah Jane, thank you so much for submitting that question in that video, because I think, well, first of all, you guys look great, but Absolutely. Second of all, really just like useful questions, I think, for everybody. And thank you, Jon. That was really helpful answers. So the next video, or 2 videos, I guess, but the next video was submitted by Krista. And let me pull it up so that you can see it while I talk. Okay. This is Krista doing novice dressage test B. In the video, this is a really good illustration of the struggle she has with dressage. She says there's a lack of connection and she's looking for feedback on how to get unstuck during a test.
Yeah, and I can see what you're talking about. The nice thing I would say right off the bat is you had a really lovely straight entry. There's no wavering at all, but for sure you'd love to see this horse a little softer, a little more supple. And I think you're ready to do it. Like, you could definitely say to people, well, don't worry about if they're round and if they're through and all of that stuff, because that will come. But you sit on your horse really well. You have a lovely, quiet way. You sit well. Everything's in the right place. but you'd love it to be a little softer. So the first thing that I would say to you is you need to lift your hands a little bit, especially in your trot work. The canter, you're a little bit softer, which is natural. Most people would be a little bit softer and better in the canter than in the trot. The other thing I would say is you could potentially just slow that trot down, the tempo down just a little bit so that you're comfortable in that sitting trot. Just take a little bit of the bounce away. I'm a big advocate, which I think I've talked about here on this before. And by the way, I don't get any kickback from them, of the EquiCube. And I think we've talked about it before. It's like quite a heavy little black cube that has handles on it. And when you ride in it, at first you feel terrible, like you can't ride anymore. And you wonder if you should just throw the thing out of the ring. But it forces you to lift your hands, bend your elbows. It gives you a really good feel for what you want in your hands. And it really helps a lot with connection issues. So as far as like a training tool or a gadget, it's a super, super helpful thing to have. So that'd be something I would try. The feeling you do a fair bit because you sit really well would be riding without stirrups. But when you ride without the stirrups, I don't want you to think of it as this is something to help you become stronger. I ride without stirrups and make my students ride without stirrups because I want them to become softer. It forces you to relax through your hip flexors, to stretch down around your horse. It makes your low back, because like when you're riding around, you can see in the moments where you're in sort of the upswing of the canter or the trot that you're just a little bit tight, stuck up there. And that's because you get tight through your hip flexors. So that'd be the other thing that I would say is, if I were you, couple things. As far as the riding goes, I would, when you go to hack, once you're sort of walking off and you've gotten on, I would walk without stirrups. I would do some lateral work in walk without stirrups to start, some haunches in on the long side, maybe leg yields on the long side, things like that, to just help you to make sure that you're soft through your low back, through your hips, through sort of where your belt would lie. And then I would also make sure that you're spending time, and I get yelled at for this all the time. I actually just got yelled at by my trainer about it today. Do your stretching, right? Like, we should all be getting up in the morning and doing a bit of a stretching routine, and I need to be a lot better about it, so that you're soft. Like, we do so much stuff for our horses to make them better, to make them more comfortable, to make them softer. And we actually do very little for ourselves to make sure that we're soft and that we're better. And we do it because we're trying to be like, oh, I want to do everything right for the horse. But if you can be more elastic through your hips and your low back and through your legs, and softer because you've spent the time making sure that you've stretched out in the morning, that is only going to help your horse. So those are the things that I would focus on. I actually think you sit really well on a horse. You're not far off of really being able to get that horse truly round and soft and through. But those would be the things as far as your riding and your position that you could work on. Obviously, there's also, which I couldn't really tell in the video, the question of bits. Is there a bit that he might be happier to take a hold of and be softer? You could play around with a loose ring, with an egg butt loose ring. Change the mouthpiece. Maybe you need a French link. Maybe you need a single joint. Maybe you need like a Springer duo bit or a Nathe or a leather bit. I tell my students who are struggling with this sort of thing all the time, like, go out and have your entire ride for one day be play with bits and see what works. Because so often when you find the right bit, it is world changing for that horse, because they suddenly become happy, and they're willing to listen to them because they aren't fighting against the bit. If you can imagine having that bit in your mouth, and if it just, because of the way your mouth was built, it just pinched you in the wrong place or poked you in the top of the mouth or pinched your tongue, you wouldn't want to do the work. So play with the bits as well. He doesn't look unhappy in his mouth. I don't mean that, but he might be willing to be a little softer if you play with that. And I think if you spent one full ride, and it's a hassle, I know why we never do it, or why people don't do it, But if you spent one ride just putting on a bridle, going out and riding, getting off, changing the bit, getting back on, riding, getting off, changing the bit, getting on, riding, and playing with that for an hour, if you found the right bit, that's going to be way more productive than getting on, trying this bit today. I don't know. Then get on tomorrow, try that bit tomorrow, and spending weeks working until you find the right bit. And then you may not remember what was the feel of the one before. So take a day and play with that kind of stuff too.
Such great advice. I love that. So this next video of Krista, let me get it queued up, is a jumping video. So Krista is saying this is the jump off, I believe. Let me look. She said this is a jump off from Sunday at Fox Lee Venice, 0.85 meter jumper. Was proud of this round. How do you shave off additional time?
So the easy answer here is you're probably not going to go a ton faster. So you're going to have to be tighter in your turns, right? Like that was a pretty efficient turn there, but the one through the end of the ring to that jump right there could have been a little tighter. Good inside line there. I mean, it was a pretty quick round. I'd be interested to know where that placed, but if we watch that one more time, I don't know if we're able, I think early in that round, you could have been a little more efficient in some of your turns. In those big rings, it's so easy to waste some time. So we're going to say, all right, so there's our start. Oh, mine froze. I don't know. Oh, there we go. Okay. So one thing here right away is you're on the left lead making that right turn, which is going to be inherently slower. So you got to be a little quicker with that first lead change. I'm stuck again. There we go. All right. And then here, so to that fence there, which I think was fence 4 or 5, the one at the far end, you went all the way out to the edge of the long side. And if you want to be quicker, you're just going to have to shave the turn there and have less time being straight. Now look, you're going to risk having a pole. So you got to play that out. Really efficient turn there on landing after the yellow fence and a good ride down that through the turn to that last fence. So I think it's going to have to be about not just inside turns, but also where you don't have the option of an inside turn, not going out to the edge of the ring and being efficient in that line. So like when I go into jump, I always tell everybody, and it's mostly true, I know every grain of sand, every blade of grass that I'm going to step on from the moment I walk into the ring until the moment I leave. And that plays into the turns as well, and not allowing yourself to go out to the edge of the ring there, and being better about your changes. So you were really good with all the changes except after that first fence, and you need to be a little better there with that first change. And I think that actually would have probably saved you a second or two, just not being on the left lead, making a right turn.
You guys looked so good, Krista. That's a fun video to watch. Okay, this next one is Katie Emerson. And one moment while I get this so you can see it. Okay. You can see Katie, right? So this is a video of Finn and Katie at the Young Event Horse Qualifier last weekend. Finn is a 4-year-old Irish mare who she's had since she was a yearling. She gave me Finn gave her an amazing feeling on this day, by far the boldest and bravest she's ever felt. Katie is looking for general feedback as well as advice on how she can help establish a better connection in the canter, i.e. create a more uphill, adjustable stride that is less on her forehand. She also said at the end is a hand gallop that was judged. She said she admittedly had never ridden above novice, so she's never truly galloped and didn't really know what the judge was looking for. The comments they received are that she flattened and lost efficiency when galloping. How can I help improve our gallop? Even if it wasn't great, it certainly was fun.
So the thing I really like about this so far is that first line you cantered down and you had a little bit of a wiggle and you went forward into a nice quiet hand, and Finn just keeps getting straighter and more confident and less wiggly as you go. So that is super. I'm waiting for your gallop here. I think this might be it. Oh, no, we got another jump. Like, I just love watching this and how you've gained confidence as you've gone through the course, or certainly Finn has gained confidence as you've gone around the course, which is really, that's the whole idea, right? That you're making them better and more confident as you go. I think we're heading down to the water here now. And I always think this water jump is such a difficult water because it's right next to the barns. And to get these horses to go through there and then turn and go away is incredibly difficult, especially for the young horses because they know where home is. So that was a very good ride. Poppy, you're not helping. Shush. And this jump here is the spookiest thing in the world. This is like a fake birch ramp. I stopped at that on earlier this year. It is very scary, and your horse just cantered up to it like no problem. So well done. And again, super impressive here by those red rails is a big open ditch. And the fact that Finn stayed focused and with you there is actually pretty impressive as well. Or maybe just mine are that terrible. I'm not sure, but well done, you. Oh, and then we get the coffin. I'm frozen again, but hopefully, there we go. All right. Sort of, mine got a little bit herky-jerky stopping and starting as we cantered through that coffin there. It looks like you had a good jump, maybe a little bit of a leap at the ditch. Okay, and then I'm assuming this is where our gallop starts because this is where we've got the orange cones. So I'm watching it. It's interesting, right? Because you want the horses to lower and flatten to have a good gallop, but they have to still have a little bit of throughness within it so they stay up through their wither. So I thought for a young horse that actually was a pretty good start to the gallop. So galloping is something that you can teach the horses within reason, just like anything else. I think it's something that you want to think about, that when you're practicing that gallop, that you're still riding, you're still training. So you're fixing things, correcting things on the go. You're not going to just go gallop off and be like, yeah, away we go. Because then they will get inefficient. They do need to still gallop into the contact. So if I'm galloping on a young horse, I typically will ride in a bridge or a half bridge, right? So that I can let them rest a little bit on their wither. But at the same point, that bridge has a bit of space between my hands. So like my hands aren't here holding the bridge, they're probably here. So there's a bit of slack in the rein so that I can also supple and bend them and make them soft in my hand, give them a little flexion right, give them a little flexion left. I think I did that backwards, right and then left. So that they stay up through the wither and soft and connected and with you, just like you should be doing in your medium canter work in the dressage. So keep cantering. Like, so here's the thing. A lot of times, like my novice horses have never done a canter set in their life. And so then you go to an event and you're like, well, this thing doesn't gallop well. And you're thinking, okay, if I went to a horse show and never did dressage, would I expect to have a good dressage test? And the answer is no. Of course you wouldn't, right? So then we go to these events or to a young horse championship. And even if you've practiced your gallop, and I'm not saying because I don't know, but thinking of myself, I would have gone to that and had never done a gallop until the day I got there. Okay, maybe I knew a week out I was going and I did one gallop. Well, that's not near the effort I would put into show jumping or dressage or cross-country schooling. So you've got to make sure you're teaching them to gallop, doing some canter sets. They don't have to be massive. You can actually go into, shameless plug, go into the rider fitness program that we did on Ride IQ. And there's some canter sets that are within that program for young horses or inexperienced horses and riders that are perfect. They don't have to be 3 7-minute canters. They could be 2 3-minute canters, right? But do some canter sets and teach your horse to canter and gallop correctly. Really, the thing is you want to feel in that gallop that even when they're covering ground, that in a moment's notice, you could stretch up, you could balance, and you could organize that horse for any fence that's coming. So within that canter, lengthen and shorten. Change your gallop when you're practicing it so that when your horse goes off to gallop in that gallop section of the course, it's not just flattening, lowering, and bolting. It's understanding like, oh, I may have to collect in a minute, and then I may have to go forward again. I was always taught when we did our gallops, which doesn't work as well here in Florida, but I was always taught when we did our gallops, you lengthened uphill and you collected downhill. On the flat, now look, there's some slope in Florida, so you can find places to do it. But if you're on flat ground, or even if you're in the winter and you're stuck in a ring, or in the summer and you're stuck in a ring, you can practice lengthening and shortening within that gallop, and that's going to be super, super helpful.
Awesome. And John, she had asked, I know you talked a lot about like improving the gallop and really establishing a strong gallop with her horse. She had asked as well about improving the connection in the canter and getting a more, what were her words? She said getting her a more uphill and adjustable stride and less on her forehand. Does the forward and back work in the gallop also apply to that question, or is there something else you want to add on that?
Yes, I think forward and back within the canter is going to help. Honestly, lots of transitions within the canter, but also canter to trot, trot to canter. Anytime I have a horse that is a little bit stiff or not feeling balanced in the canter, I actually do a lot of trot to canter transitions. When you're talking about a 4-year-old, it's not going to have the base muscle to be able to canter for long periods of time. So I have a 5-year-old right now that I think a lot of, and he is still weak. He is really loose and floppy and wobbly. And so I cannot get that canter to improve quickly enough. Not that I can't get it to improve quickly enough, but like I always want more is my point. But if you just canter and canter and canter, and even forward and back in the canter, eventually they get to the point where they're exhausted. It's like me going to the gym and doing bench press. It doesn't matter how much I want to do 190-pound bench press. I can't. I just can't. I'm not good at it. So I have to do less. I have to take breaks and slowly over time build up that strength. And it's the same thing for your horse. It's doing squats, right? And it's cantering. We want them to squat more. So do a circle, trot a circle, canter a circle, trot a circle, canter, and keep doing lots of transitions, not long periods of time in the canter, but lots of transitions into canter so that you slowly are building up that time, but you're giving your horse breaks, and they can be walk breaks in there too occasionally, but that trot to canter, canter to trot really makes a big difference.
Wonderful advice. Well, Katie, thank you for submitting your video. That was a fun one to watch and great round on that cross country. Okay. Our next one is Kara, and here is Kara, and let me just make sure that here, make her bigger. This is a video of Kara and her horse, Octavia. Octavia is a 7-year-old perch quarter horse cross, and this is a video from their first recognized dressage show. This is the USEF training test 2 or training 2 test. Kara feels that they lacked consistency in impulsion and self-carriage. They also had difficulty with their left lead, for which they continue to search for a potentially underlying cause with their vet. She's looking for general feedback and recommendations of things they can do to progress, and she's hoping to show some first level dressage next season.
All right. So first thing I'd say, it's a beautiful horse. I love the color, love the top line. Looks like a nice, sturdy, beautiful animal. The first center line on my video here, it froze a little bit a couple times, but it looked quite wobbly. So make sure that while you're working on the connection and the softness, particularly on the straight lines, that you're not losing straightness to try to get your horse to be softer, if that makes sense. You're always better off to be forward and straight and then add in the suppleness so that you don't lose the straightness. That straightness, that suppleness wants to be coming more from flexion left and right through your horse's jaw and poll, and not so much from bend, which I think looks like a little bit where you guys struggle. And yeah, you can see the left lead being tough there. That's tough once you get out of that short end. It's so hard to get it. Well done, you staying with it though. And that's, in reality, that's exactly what you need to do. And really all you could do was just say, right, you're still on the right lead and come back to trot. And we're still on the right lead and come back to trot. And I know that sounds basic, but it's so important because I have seen people go in there and like try to correct it once or twice and then be like, oh, well, I'm on the right lead. I guess this is what I have. The judges want to see you make that correction. Really good stretchy trot here. You would say you could maybe be just a little bit rounder in it. And I don't really mean your horse's head and neck, but make sure that when you, like, I like it there where you finished better, make sure that when you're stretching, you have just a little bit of feel that the wither is staying up underneath you so that your horse doesn't drop it onto its forehand. Got just a little bit flat there through the base of his neck. It's a nice walk. You have really good overstep. So I would say watching this test, the things that you would really benefit from, a little bit backtracking to the previous horse, lots of transitions, lots of no stirrup work so that you can get softer again through your hips and your low back and be able to wrap yourself down around your horse. And I would be interested, once you're confident and balanced enough, because I've never seen you ride without stirrups, I would be interested that if you didn't have stirrups, would your horse be better about the lead? And I'm going to venture to say, I bet he would, because you can't brace against a stirrup iron that isn't there. And so then you have to sit down, and it tends to help you as a rider with your personal straightness, because you can't lean into one iron more than the other. Because if you do, you just slide off the side of your horse. So you find that center. So again, I'd be doing lots of no stirrup work, but with the understanding that you're not doing it to punish yourself or to get stronger. It's actually to get you to get softer. But I think with this horse, the one thing I would be doing a ton of are trot to walk transitions, because you can see as he goes, he gets a little bit longer, a little bit lower through the test, a little bit flatter through the horse's wither. And so I think if you can, for schooling at home, just do a ton of trot walk transitions, one, it's going to get your horse better to your leg, but two, it's going to help your horse coordinate its body and be able to stay softer through its wither up into your hand. This would be another rider that I think could benefit from the EquiCube. And as I say that, I don't even know if they make them anymore, actually, full disclosure, but it's a really good training tool to help you understand what that feel is supposed to be in your hand. Okay. You want to have that feel in your hand. And it's so difficult to explain a feel to a rider that hasn't maybe felt it on a particular horse. So if you can get a hold of one, it'd be worth trying, right? It's like, I don't know, 5-8 pounds. I don't even know what they weigh. They're incredibly heavy actually for what you would think, but it gets you the feel for what is supposed to be in your hand, and it can really be a game changer. So if you can find one, that is another good little gadget for anybody who's trying to work on finding that connection and that softness. That said, it was a nice, pleasant test. Other than the left lead, it looked like smooth. There was no disagreement with your horse's head and neck and frame and fighting in the bridle. Looked very pleasant to watch. It was a nice test. If you can do it and you're comfortable in your balance, ride without stirrups, and practice that canter. And if that makes a big difference, then you can start to rest assured, which is good news, that it's you and your straightness and maybe not something in your horse's body. If it stays the same, then you may have to keep going down the path you were talking about making sure veterinary wise that everything is good with your horse. But I find a lot of times, like if I get on a horse and I'm struggling to make it go or to make it stay straight, if I drop my stirrups, I'm always like, wow, that solved that problem. I guess it's me. And it really can make a big difference.
Yeah, it's honestly great news when it's you. It's like, I can fix
Totally.
this. Like,
Yep.
I have control over this. Well, Kara, you guys look so great. And I have so much like admiration for when you can have like a little bobble like that in a test and not let the rest of the test just become total madness. Like, I think it's gonna be hard to not like let that psych you out and just totally lose focus for the rest of your test. But you really kept your cool and executed a great test. So I loved watching that.
Absolutely. I will just say real briefly here, Kinsey. I remember years ago, I was at a horse show coaching a kid, and she picked up the wrong lead and just kept cantering the whole side on the wrong lead, and then picked up the other lead and cantered the whole side the other way on the wrong lead. And she came out, and I was like, what are you doing? You were on the wrong lead both ways. And she said, yeah, I know, but I didn't want to change because I was afraid the judge would notice.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cute.
That's amazing. Honestly, I'm sure that was harder to do both ways on the wrong lead. Like,
yeah,
that's
impossible.
impressive. She should have gotten extra points for that.
Extra points. Yeah, +2.
Yeah, bonus points. Okay, this next one is Amanda and Presto at their recent 1-star.
All right. Go. I know this place.
Yeah, you're familiar with it?
Do we have questions with this one, or is this just a general?
Sorry, yes, just general feedback.
Okay, cool. So I love how you have a connection with your horse, but it's not, that was a hard line. I remember that, but it's not, he's not too deep. You're letting him look at the jump, look up and out with his eye. That said, you could have been a little bit more accurate probably coming out of that water. I think we get going on cross country, we kind of get hammering in. Remember that distance coming out of that water was a little bit show jumping, and it was kind of an accuracy bending line, if I recall. And so you looked a little bit gallopy, a little bit aggressive into it. And that particular fence actually required quite a refined show jump ride. So look, in general, beautiful, love it. Maybe we can watch it one more time. Beautiful, love it, love the outline, love the frame. I think if I'm being critical, I would say you came into that water a little bit galloping, looking like you're like, oh, we just got to make sure we jump the water. At this Tricaner as well, you did just come back against him a little bit at the Tricaner, probably because you just want to make sure he gets the ditch done. But right here, coming through the water, you just get hammering up to this first cabin a little bit and get a little bit deep there. Had a great jump out, though. So look, I'm guilty of it all the time as well, because I would rather be strong and make sure we jump it and make the horse have to like get out of the way than ride that soft, accurate ride. If you can be a little braver to be soft and not attack everything, that to me is when you're really gaining experience. So I try to maybe just explaining it a little different way. If you have a horse that balloons and jumps huge into the water, just as an example, the brave thing to do is canter down there with very little leg on so that your horse doesn't explode into the water. It's easy when you ride into water to just be like, oh, I've got to ride hard. It's water and attack. It's harder to come in and say, I know my horse is going to take care of this. I'm going to be soft. So I felt like if I'm being critical, you just hammered at that cabin out of the water a little. That said, he landed and he turned and went to the next thing really nicely. So I'm being quite picky. But you looked a little aggressive with the lower leg and seat at the Tricaner a bit and coming out of the water a little bit, where I think you could have been maybe just a little bit more trusting. That said, I'd rather have a clear round where maybe I overrode one or two fences than a beautiful, lovely, soft round and then you have a silly mistake somewhere. So really good job. Love the frame. Love that the horse has his nose up and out. Love that you're allowing him to look at the fences. But just as you're practicing for your, I think you said that was, well, I know that was the 1-star. So when you're practicing for your 2-star, start thinking about, can you be braver by being softer in certain places where you know this is something this horse should take care of?
Awesome. Well, Amanda, you guys looked beautiful. That's a really, I mean, you guys always look beautiful. So that was great to see. And Jon, that was all the videos we received, and we have a couple minutes left. I know you had a big weekend at the horse show this past weekend. Should we watch some of those videos? How are you feeling?
It's whatever you want to do. I am here for you. I got no time constraints, but I also don't want to bore people with videos of my horses.
There is nothing less boring. That was a double negative, but there's nothing boring about about watching you ride. So I know you sent me a bunch of videos. Do you have any preferences on where we start, or what would be?
No, I feel like people probably don't want to watch an entire dressage test. I will say, if you're gonna do a test, Pretzel has a moment in his, which is kind of funny, but it's a novice test, so it's probably also incredibly boring. So we can go right to jumping if you want. Whatever you decide.
Sure. I'll just pull up this one, and then you can just talk us through the round.
All right, so who do we got here? I think this looks like this is Big Irv. All right, so this is Irving. So Irving is 6 years old. He is big. I haven't put a stick on him because I'm kind of scared to. His tendency is that he gets a little bit over round and sticks his nose into his chest. So I'm always trying to find something to get him to be up and out. And you can see right there, he gets too round on me. And then what happens is he doesn't pick the fence up as well. He's a little bit on his head, a little bit tail swishy and tight in his back. And then the distance isn't quite as good as you'd like. And I have a rail here because of it. I think it's at the next fence because I just didn't do a good enough job riding him up and out to the contact. I think it's right here. I just lost my straightness. Yep, I lost my straightness and just bumped that pole because he wasn't straight and he was too round like he is here again. So this is something I'm always working on with Irving. He's an incredibly good horse and one of the sweetest horses in the barn, by the way. Just a nice guy. But he gets low in his frame. He gets a little bit like tail swishing butt up behind him. And so that's a life quest with this horse and probably will always be something I have to work on. Because the problem is then when you get a horse that does that and gets too round, then when they do pick their head up, it's a complete change in their balance. And so we've got to keep working on trying to kind of keep him level and keep him the same and have him not be such an argumentative, and he's not arguing, he's just struggling with his balance, quite honestly. So we got to keep working on that to try to finish him up. You can see here at the end how I'm trying to pick him up and ride him up into that uphill frame. That's what I'm always working on with Irving, riding him up so that hopefully eventually he can sit down.
So can you explain exactly what you're doing in order to try to accomplish that? Are there like exercises that you're doing at home to try to move in that direction? Or is it like, how are you changing your aids in order to do that?
Yeah. Well, so for one thing, he's actually a very uphill built horse. So when I started with him, I was always trying to make him rounder, right? And probably messed up a little bit when I had him originally a year and a half ago, because I was always trying to make him go round, make him go round, make him go round. And then I started realizing like, okay, well, I think I'd rather he was up and out and maybe a little tight in his jaw, but in the right balance that I need, that would benefit me to be able to jump. So I actually now don't spend as much time stretching him in the trot as I used to. Like I still do a little bit of stretching either in the beginning or the end, but even then I want him a little bit open through his throat latch. I don't want him to be too round. Like I told people in the earlier videos, I'm working tons of transitions with him, just transition after transition after transition. But when I'm riding him, he very often will feel actually too up and tighten his jaw. And when I feel that tightness in his jaw and he'll grab the left rein on me a little bit, I try, and I'm not always successful, but I try not to panic about it and like make him soft in my hand, because I know that part will come. And what I need to do is work on his balance. His balance is far more important than his softness in his mouth right now. And if I work on the balance, magically, ta-da, then the softness in his mouth usually comes along.
That's really helpful. So much fun to watch these videos. Okay, I'm going to just pick one out of the list for this next one. We'll see which one we're watching. Oh, I'm gonna go back to the beginning.
It is Pretzel doing his cross country here. So Pretzel is coming through the water. He's basically perfect, to be honest. So the one thing I'd say about Pretzel, which I was talking about earlier, is he is really loose. He's a horse, you know, who, and I haven't talked to him about it yet, so maybe I'm wrong and he'll tell me he hates him, but this is a horse Kyle would love. Kyle loves loose, floppy, gangly horses because they move, right? And they operate all of their joints. So I've had to be patient with Pretzel, and I'm happy to be patient with Pretzel because he's perfect. But I've had to be patient with Pretzel to give him time to just get stronger. So he went out this weekend. He was really good. He was nice, and he's going to do a couple more novices. He's actually going to go to the AECs next week. But it's a fine line. Like when Jen helps me with him, she's always like, you know, you got to kick him together a little bit more. You need to put a little more pressure on him. And she's probably right. I'm probably a little too nice to him sometimes, but I feel like he just needs time to sort of grow up and grow into his body and get more mature. And I think he's going to be absolutely incredible. But right now, sometimes you're out there and it's just like you're just riding some goofy horse that maybe has, like, you know, his bones haven't finished hardening up or something. They have, but it feels like he's like Gumby underneath you, just floppy and kind of all over the place. But he's starting to grow up, and I know he's starting to grow up because when we got him as a young horse, and this isn't because he's sour, by the way. When I got him as a young horse, he was the sweetest, nicest, slightly spooky horse, and he's actually getting a little bit of an attitude. He thinks he's pretty hot stuff, and he will like push into you and be just a little bit of a bugger, which I love, because to me, they have to have a little bit of that spicy attitude, and he's starting to develop that and thinking quite a lot of himself. So I think his mind is starting to come, his body is starting to mature, and I think he's going to be pretty cool.
Oh, I love that. That's so fun. He sounds like he's a great guy, and you really appreciate him. Yeah, okay.
Cool.
We'll do one more because I'm having fun with this.
Oh, thank God. I was hoping you'd get Zelda. Okay, so this is actually super interesting because this goes into what we were talking about. So Zelda is doing the preliminary here. She's going to go to the ACs, and then at some point, touch wood, she's going to move up to intermediate. And so I'm starting to really have to work on her softness and her connection. She's a great jumper. She does just lose a little bit of her softness between the jumps, though, sometimes, and then she'll tighten just a little behind on me. It's getting better and better all the time. But you'll see coming forward here, and I'll tell you a little sneak preview about it now so you can be looking for it. When we come around this same section of ring here off the right turn coming to the last line, Zelda usually drifts a little bit left, and she actually drifts, funny enough, a little bit right on me, I think because I was overcorrecting. And I'm just a little bit gappy in the 8 strides to the last combination. And because of that, you can't hear it because the volume's not on. I actually jump into the double and have to give a big whoa, 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 because she jumps in so strong, and she's getting better at this, but she is an aggressive woman. And she absolutely just hauled me down here because I did a bad job. I was too open in the 8. I got long and weak. And then I thought I had it saved, but we had the last down, and I was so mad because she won the dressage. She was on a 25, and I blew it because I just let her drift out to the right down that line and made that 8 strides just a little bit weak. And I can't afford to do that on Zelda because then I have to kick, and then she is like, game on, let's go. And then she just launched into that double. I thought I handled it, and I thought, like, for the level we would be okay, but then we have the last rail down, and it was all because of the fence 3 fences before, because I sucked.
You didn't suck, Jon. She is an amazing jumper, man.
She
so
is good.
Fun to watch. That is really,
she
really cool.
Won't even talk to me today. She was that mad about it, but I think by tomorrow she'll be over it.
Classic mare. I love that. How old is she?
She's 7. So she did a
Oh my
2-star this
gosh.
spring. I'm hoping she'll move up to intermediate. No promises, but that's kind of the tentative plan. But probably won't do an FEI this autumn. The plan would be to do a three long next year. I suppose I could do a short if timing and competitions worked out this autumn, but really the plan is just to try to play around with the level a little bit this autumn so that she can be ready next spring.
Amazing. Well, we'll be cheering for all three of them, Pretzel, Irving, and Zelda. You've got a strong lineup right now, Jon. It's really, really cool to see.
Cool
Totally. Well, thank you for taking the time. I know I had so much fun just watching the videos and learning from you, and just always really appreciate you sharing your insights with us.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me show off my horses. That was kind of fun.
I had fun. I loved that.
I appreciate everybody sending their videos in. I know, like, I always think about if I sent my videos in for somebody to critique, I would be quite nervous to hear what they have to say. So hopefully it was helpful, but also thanks for sending them in, because I know that takes a certain amount of bravery. So well done.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. I can't reiterate that enough. So everybody who sent your videos in, we really appreciate it, because you give us an opportunity to learn from you and learn from Jon. And it's just a wonderful exercise for us all to do. But thank you so much, Jon. Thank you, everyone who attended live. Thank you, everyone who submitted videos. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye, guys.
Awesome.